In the darkest hours of World War II, it seemed that the light of hope had gone out for the Jews in Europe. The German war machine was rounding up, deporting, and killing the Jews in the gas chambers of Treblinka, Auschwitz, and others in Poland and other countries. Nation after nation had abandoned their Jews, as Hitler's armies silenced all opposition that rose against the extermination of the Jews and other people they deemed to be undesirables. It appeared that God's chosen people would be systematically erased from Europe in the Nazi death camps. At first, Bulgaria was neutral in the war, but fearing certain invasion, Bulgaria sided with Germany, Japan, and Italy on March 1, 1941, and became a part of the Axis. The promise to return territory lost to Bulgaria during previous wars seemed to seal the deal between Bulgaria and the Axis nations. On January 23, 1941, Bulgaria had passed the law for the protection of the nation, which was similar to the Nuremberg laws in Germany. These laws, while not as severe as the Germans, stripped the Jews of all their rights and property. On February 22, 1943, Aleksandrov, the Bulgarian Commissioner of Jewish Affairs, and Theodor Daniker, the Gestapo chief in Bulgaria, and associate of Adolf Eichmann, signed an agreement to deport 8,000 Bulgarian Jews, plus 12,000 from Macedonia and Thrace, to the Nazi death camps in Poland. March 10 was the date when the Bulgarian Jews would be deported. The trains were ready to take them to the death camps, and there seemed to be nothing that could stop this great tragedy from taking place. The Jews were to be deported to the death camps from the small town of Kyustendil and from Plovdiv, Bulgaria's second largest city. The Jews were warned about the deportation, and they quickly prepared to send a delegation to Sofia to see if they could stop it. Only hours remained before the Jews would be loaded on the trains and sent to their death. This delegation of 4 men went to Sofia, the capital, to see Dimitar Peshev, the deputy speaker of the Bulgarian parliament. Peshev was born in this same small town and had many Jewish friends there. At first he couldn't believe what he was being told, but he immediately promised to help his friends that he grew up with, as well as all the other Jews living in Bulgaria, Macedonia, and Thrace. There was no time to waste. He must act quickly or the Jews would perish. This was a moment of truth that many of us come to in our lives at some point. A difficult decision has to be made, but fear of failure grips us because we know our decision may mean ruin. It is at this point that we either decide to go forward with what is right or stay in our comfort zone and hope for some magical solution to a problem we do not want to deal with. Peshev immediately decided to act and asked to meet with Bogdan Filov, the Bulgarian Prime Minister, but Filov, a strong anti-Semite, refused to see him. Peshev then went to see the Minister of the Interior, Peter Gabrowski, also a strong anti-Semite and Nazi lover. Gabrowski at first denied there were deportation orders, but Peshev knew he was lying, and pressed him to cancel the order. Peshev was now a part of Bulgaria's finest hour. He did what few would have done. He put his future, career, and his life on the altar of greatness, and never looked back. He demanded that the order to deport the Jews to the death camps be cancelled. Peshev, after a furious argument with Gabrowski, threatened to take the issue to the floor of the Bulgarian parliament, and cause a national scandal. He knew Bulgarians had no hatred or real issues with their Jews. After this confrontation, the deportation order was suddenly cancelled just 2 hours before it was to have begun. The Jews were all told to go home. For the moment, their lives were saved, but they were still in great danger of being deported. Peshev had stood up against the powerful forces in his own government and had won a temporary reprieve for the Jews. He was a good man, with a great heart, who believed in justice and love for his fellow man. He had stopped, at least for a moment, the Nazis' killing machine. This was nothing less than a miracle. Peshev knew that the Nazi sympathizers in the government would try again. So he took the issue to the parliament and convinced 42 other members to place their names on a letter of protest to the king, asking him to save the nation's Jews. The men whose names appeared on the protest letter were all fascists, and members of the king's own party in the parliament. No opposition member was allowed to sign the letter. It was to be clearly understood that this was members of the king's own party opposing the deportations. The Bulgarian Prime Minister, Bogdan Filov, strongly disliked Dimitar Peshev and considered his actions to save the Jews as treasonous. Peshev, the deputy speaker of the parliament, was stripped of his position and dismissed from the government. His career and reputation were ruined, and he lived the rest of his life in disgrace. His part in this great effort to save the Jews had ended as quickly as it had begun. Peshev's efforts to save the Jews of Bulgaria were hidden from the world until 1989, when the communist era came to an end. The communists lied and claimed they had rescued Bulgaria's Jews from Hitler. They would never admit to the world that Dimitar Peshev, the Bulgarian Church, King Boris, and many others were the ones that actually saved the Jews. The question asked by many people who have studied the Holocaust is, why did Bulgaria, a small and powerless country, save their Jews when other more powerful nations did nothing? The answer to this question can be found in the history of Bulgaria. Few nations on earth ever suffered as much abuse and humiliation as Bulgaria. Bulgarians lived for hundreds of years under occupation, oppression, and the constant threat of death by an empire that treated them as slaves. Their heroes had laid down their lives for justice and freedom for the Bulgarian nation. The Bulgarians knew what evil men like the Nazis were capable of doing, and they wanted no part in it. The spirit and memory of great men like Levski, Rakovsky, and Botev rose up in Peshev and others who stood up for the Jews and refused to surrender them to Hitler and the death camps. Because of his efforts to save the Jews, Peshev's career came to a swift and sudden end. He was banished to a life of poverty, destitution, and isolation. He lost his property, his income, and his good name and reputation. He lived in fear of assassination for the rest of his days. He was denied his rightful place in history as a rescuer of the Bulgarian Jews until long after his death. After the communists came to power in Bulgaria, they put him on trial in an illegal people's court. He was accused of being a German collaborator, an anti-Semite, and anti-communist. He was saved from the firing squad but was given a 15-year prison sentence. He served only 1 year of this sentence because of some Jewish friends who were able to convince the communists to release him. 30 years later, in January 1973, 1 month before he died, Israel honored him with the Righteous Among the Nations Award. This award is given to non-Jews who risked their own lives to save the Jewish people during the Holocaust. It was 45 years after the war ended before the world heard the name Dimitar Peshev and learned what he had done to save the Jews of Bulgaria. Thousands of others across Europe did what they could to help rescue the Jews, but only the efforts of a few like Raoul Wallenberg, Oskar Schindler, and Dimitar Peshev were able to save so many from the death camps. Peshev and the Bulgarian people not only saved the Jews, but they saved the honor and the reputation of Bulgaria. The only other country in Europe to save their Jews was Denmark. Peshev once wrote, "My human conscience and my understanding of the fateful consequences both for the people involved and the policy of our country now and in the future didn't allow me to remain idle. I decided to do all in my power to prevent what was being planned from happening. I knew that this action was going to shame Bulgaria in the eyes of the world and brand her with a stain she didn't deserve." The rescue of the Bulgarian Jews had its beginning long before World War II. It started in the mountains and the valleys of Bulgaria, in lonely and deserted places where countless men, women, and children gave up their lives for freedom and justice and the dignity of the Bulgarian people. They fought against impossible odds, against an evil and ruthless empire that had held them in chains and slavery for almost 500 years. Peshev and others simply followed the example of these brave men and women who were said to have been born with the souls of eagles. The Bulgarian people refused to allow tyranny to win and will forever be remembered as a people that rose up in a time of great evil, without regard for their own lives, and saved the Jews.